being open to opportunities. I think if we go into life just being like, every guy around me is a creep and I'm too scared to look desperate, so I'm not going to flirt, or I'm not going to let my friends and family set me up because that's embarrassing, you're just shutting down opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And it's important to be a little bit shameless with this, where you're not ashamed of like, oh, I'd love to be in a relationship. But that does not mean I'm going to marry just anybody. It doesn't mean I'm going to start a relationship with just anybody. But it does mean that you're open and you're not embarrassed. And I think that mindset fuels the rest of this. Because like I said, all right, hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Caitlin and I run the blog called Mrs. Midwest. And today we are going to finally be addressing and making a video on a highly requested topic you guys have asked about since the genesis of my channel, and that is how to meet husband material men, how to meet traditional men, how to meet worthwhile men, wonderful men. Where are these men hiding? How do we find them? How do we get them to marry us, etc.? A lot of my audience are women who are either aspiring homemakers, current homemakers, women who maybe even want to be part-time homemakers. And what's the common denominator in all those scenarios? It's that there's an aspiration towards marriage, specifically more traditional marriage where you get to stay home either full-time or part-time. And in order to do that, you need a very specific kind of man. I've addressed all this in one of my videos about how to become a homemaker. You can't beat around the bush. In order to achieve that dream of being a mom, of being at home, you need a man. You need him, like somebody's got to be out there making money so you can stay home. That's just how traditional relationships work. It's not everybody's cup of tea, nor do I believe everybody needs to live life this way. I've never believed that. I've never said that. Some people say that about me. That's not true. However, I like to make content for people who aspire to live a similar lifestyle to what I live. But I'm already married. I found my husband. We met in 2016. That's a long time ago. I've been out of the dating game for a long time. So when you guys have been approaching me about how do you meet traditional men, I always felt like my advice did not matter because I'm not single. I have not been dating. I have not been in the dating game. So that being said, I have taken the time to look into this topic, to hear advice, to talk to my married friends, to listen to what you guys have said. And I'm going to compile that into this ultimate advice video about how to meet these kind of men, these special men that match our desires, who want to live a similar lifestyle to us, because no, it is not just every man off the street, especially nowadays. So why am I bringing all of this up? Well, I really don't think you can just go out there and be like, okay, I'm going to go find a traditional man today. Where is he at? You know, I feel like you need to get into the right mindset when you're preparing yourself to date. Modern dating, like there's been so many op-eds all over the internet about this topic. And why is that? It's because it's a problem. It's a problem for a lot of people. It's not just for the girls looking for that, you know, traditional guy. It's a problem for almost everybody. So I just also want to say, if finding a guy has been difficult for you, there's nothing wrong with you. Everything is wrong with modern dating. That's where the problem lies. So what do we do when we have a problem? Do we lay down and just be sad? Maybe for a little, but then we get up and we make strategies. And unfortunately, you're gonna have to have a little bit more of a strategy and a hardcore like mindset, because everything is more difficult. It is more complicated. So just know I do I'm not just like this married person who's like, oh, I don't know why people are single. I get it. I have so many single friends. I feel for them. I've heard the stories. I've heard the craziness out there. And so that's also why I haven't made this video for a long time, because I just don't want to be talking about something that I, like myself, have not experienced. But it's such a requested topic that's why I made this video. A lot of these modern dating problems have resulted from some advancements in dating. Like I said, online dating, freedom for women to not just have to marry some guy they grew up with. You have a lot more options now as a woman, which is great, but then it's also causing problems. Online dating is one of the wonderful things about modern dating. You can meet somebody just through your phone, but the problem with that is there's this consumeristic side of it where you're presented with these like scorecards of a person right away. Like there's this grass is greener thing too, where it's like, oh, maybe I matched with a few people, but what if there's something better out there and I just got to keep swiping and I got to keep matching. A lot of people take advantage of the dating landscape to be extremely selfish and self-centered. So that's where we have hookup culture, situationships, or like long-term girlfriend that he never plans on marrying. So as we're approaching this, I think it's really important to know like what you guys are up against is different than what we were up against even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So if you have your parents breathing down your neck, like, I want grandchildren, when are you gonna get married? Just know that it was a lot easier for them, and there's nothing wrong with you. That being said, let's dive into the first area that I think is really important when you're going out to meet a traditional man, and you guys knew this was coming, and that is to work on yourself. So much of dating is attracting, okay? So it's not just about what you're attracted to or going out and like finding that guy, because say you found that guy and you see him there and he's like at church and you're like, wow, he's amazing. You have to attract him to you. Just because someone's wonderful doesn't mean they're gonna wanna date you. You have to become dateable. This is really obvious advice. You can find it all over YouTube, but I'm not gonna leave it out just because of that. I think it's really important. Specifically for Christian women, religious women, I think sometimes there's a pitfall where we over-spiritualize dating. Does this mean I don't believe that God can bring you your future husband? Does this mean I don't think God has a hand in who you're gonna marry? No, but I do think sometimes people can get kind of lazy, like sit back on their laurels and just like pray for their future husband and just like expect him to drop out of the sky. I know that's a little dramatic, but honestly, like expect him to just walk through church next week, or if I'm this good Christian girl, he'll just find me. And the fact of the matter is dating is mating. It's something that God put into creation, like the art of male and female and attraction, and all of that matters. Christian or not, you still have to attract the guy to you. So how do we do that? Amplify your attractiveness. I have so many videos about femininity, style, beauty, health. The reason I go over these things is because these are an advantage to you in dating, yes, but also in your personal mental health, your personal life, your career even. I know I don't really have a career, but those things are beneficial also to your career, your success, growing as a person, focusing on your beauty, your health, your style, your exterior, and your character, growing your attractiveness, becoming mentally stable. Working on yourself is just the number one way you should all be approaching dating. I'm not saying you have to be this model. I'm not saying you have to be stunning. I'm not saying you have to be a bodybuilder to go out there and attract men, but I am saying you need to put your best foot forward, especially if you kind of feel like you have high standards for guys. It's important to make sure that you are the type of woman they would be interested in. Now, this does not mean I am encouraging desperation. Absolutely not. I think that there's a huge difference between desperation and desire. A lot of young Christian women, especially young religious women, young women who want to be homemakers, you have that desire. I had it in me too. That desire for a relationship and a marriage so that eventually you can build your family, you can live your dream life, whatever. That needs to be separated from desperation. Desperation is where we get situations where a girl is settling. She'll marry someone with red flags. She'll settle for someone who has a corn addiction, if you know what I mean by that. Someone who has a drinking problem, someone who is lazy, someone who doesn't care about her, doesn't share her religious views, whatever. I think a lot of us have it kind of sewn into us from a young age that there's something wrong with putting yourself out there. There's something wrong with wanting to be in a relationship. There's something desperate about just even wanting to be in a relationship. And I've talked about this before. I have a video about how it's not wrong to not want to be single anymore. We've wrongfully conflated desperation with desire. And I really feel like people who do that just genuinely hate women. They want to make you feel bad for something natural. It's totally fine for a guy to go out there and to pursue a relationship and find himself a wife and start a life, but you can't do that as a woman without being labeled like desperate or a pick me, like that just really upsets me, because why is it okay for a man to have a desire to start a family and to have a marriage, but if a woman wants to start a family and have a marriage, she's desperate? And I think a lot of us have that conditioned into us. And just know your big sister on the internet, if you view me that way, is telling you that that's just total garbage. That's not true. You're not desperate just because you desire. So I'm talking about this stuff, like working on yourself and thinking about what you're looking for in a guy and your mindset, because all of this is going to inform your dating experience. Because when you go at things and you know that like you are just as worthy of starting that marriage and that family as the next guy over there, okay? When you have that confidence, when you kind of know what you're looking for and you know you're also working on yourself and becoming the best version of yourself, your standards are going to be better. You're going to attract better men, because that's what I keep getting asked since I started YouTube. How do we find these great men? How do I find a man like your man? These men who want healthy marriages where they're like lovely and they take care of you and you have this mutual love and affection and a healthy family unit. People who have that are healthy themselves. And so that's why it's important to get healthy yourself and to identify negative mindsets and negative feedback loops you might have with yourself. And I really think one of the negative feedback loops a lot of single people can have is this feeling like there's something wrong with you for wanting to be in a relationship. So number one, that there's nothing wrong with you. Work on yourself. That's my homework to all of you. Especially if you're in a season where you don't have access to other men because you're like living in the middle of nowhere, or you're like in a city, which can also kind of be a dating desert. Work on yourself. Take the time in your life to work on yourself when God gives you that time. If you work on yourself and you work on your mental health and you work on your like career and building up your life and your social network, a lot of those things will still be there and they'll be natural to you when you're dating, and they will just benefit your relationship. The same way we want a guy who has a lot going for him. Great guys want women with a lot going for them. And yes, that's different because they might not care about your career as much. Like if you're this high earner, they might not care if you have a lot of status. They might not care if you're the funniest girl in the room. But they're going to care about your health and beauty. They're going to care about your character. They're going to care about those things. So as you're single, always be working on yourself. Also, as you're approaching dating, it's really important to consider your parents. Whether you like it or not, your parents have a massive influence on how you subconsciously and even consciously view romantic relationships. A lot of it is through that lens. Sometimes I want to be just like them. More often than not, I want to be nothing like them. But even if you want to be nothing like your parents, when emotions get conflated, when things get intense, sometimes we can display behaviors that we learned growing up. We can maybe model our relationships after our parents, whether we realize that or not. So if you have a very obvious area, like you guys might know what I mean, like where maybe you have what people term daddy issues, or you have had a mom who was extremely critical and difficult to be around, or maybe had a personality disorder, check yourself. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. I know that's so harsh, but honestly, I had to do this. I had to look and see, okay, what mental health problems have I inherited? How can I work on myself? What therapy can I get? What books do I need to read? Because I don't want to repeat what I saw growing up. And that might be crazy for some of you, but for those of us who have lived that, that's a really huge fear, that, oh, I'm going to go get married, but marriage looks so miserable. So why, like, how do I avoid that? I don't know if you've ever had this, but maybe you even think you're avoiding it, but then you somehow keep ending up in relationships that mirror what you're trying to run away from. And so when you're building your mindset for dating and finding this great guy, it's really important to look at your own history, your own mental health, your own patterns of behavior. Some people are like afraid of intimacy, so they always like self-sabotage. Maybe you're always single because right at the moment it starts getting kind of interesting, you push him away, or you find a flaw with him, or he is suddenly so unattractive to you, but he was really attractive to you a week ago and you can't put your finger on why. You might have intimacy issues. There's also people who have personality disorders that are undiagnosed, and you're always looking for drama. You're always looking for a really big like emotional payoff with your partner. consider going to therapy. See if you have a diagnosis. Like, I'm not going to beat around the bush. So much of dating is internal work. And I'm not saying you can't meet a great guy without like totally becoming this perfect version of yourself. You have to be the most beautiful, the most mentally healthy, in therapy, all this stuff. I'm not saying that. But I am saying sometimes we can get into patterns with men and we can be like, where are all the good men? I'm only meeting schmucks. And it's like, well, your friend over there is meeting great guys. What is she doing that's different? And often there are differences, not necessarily that she's prettier or anything, but maybe she's more developed in her sense of self, or she's like worked on herself, or she's not attracted to dysfunction. So pay attention if you are distracted to dysfunction, because so many times we say something and then we act differently. So maybe you're saying, I want this healthy, wonderful relationship, but you're finding yourself attracted to dysfunction, to that guy who doesn't really like you that much, who just wants you to be a situationship, or he's a corn addict, or he's a video game addict, or he's going to be a terrible father, and you don't know why you're attracted to that. Work on that before we focus on dating, because I actually do not believe it's so important to get young girls like married off young. Like, no. Take time to mature. Let your prefrontal cortex develop. That's a great thing. It's great to be developed. It's great to be sure of yourself, to know who you are, and to identify when you're creating bad habits that can lead to a really traumatic, dramatic relationship and marriage. And the reason I'm also focusing so much on this is because so many people find themselves into marriage 10 years and it's like, oh, I married an abusive narcissist. And that's horrifying and tragic, and I don't want that for you guys. And the way to avoid it is by working on yourself first. Also, just because you're going after that great family guy with good character who's traditional and wants a homemaker doesn't mean every guy who says he's like that is going to be a catch. A lot of people can, like, not to scare you, but men can hide a lot. They can maybe like say what you want them to say to get you. Not to scare you, but it's really important to just not like put the blinders on. And I've said this before on my channel. It's really important not to put your blinders on the second you hear that they love Jesus, or you see them raising their hand in church, or they say they want like 4 kids, or they want a homemaker. Don't just get so giddy and excited that you overlook other things. How do they treat you? How are their like long-term relationships with their family? Do they have friends? Are they able to be honest and like make a good living? Like, I just really, really want you guys to protect yourself. If you've held on this long into the video, we are now going to talk about practical ways to meet these men. So another reason I was kind of reticent to make this video is because meeting and dating men has never been difficult for me. That's not a humble brag. I know it sounds like it, but like not everything in womanhood has been easy for me or a dream. Like, if you want the tea, watch my birth story. Like, I'm not this perfect woman out here. But if I'm being honest with you guys, finding dates, having a boyfriend, finding guys that wanted to marry me was never difficult. You know those girls where even when they're in the first grade, like they always have a crush, or they always have some sort of like relationship going on, or they're 13 with their first boyfriend? Like, I was that kind of person. I grew up with brothers. I grew up very comfortable around men. I grew up like really understanding them, liking being in a relationship, easily pursuing that, not having a hard time putting myself out there, etc. But I think that kind of makes me like a good person to give some of this advice, because I can kind of share like what worked for me, what mindsets. I think there's so much we can learn from people who prioritize singleness and their like career growth or things like that over relationships. Just like I think we can actually learn a lot from people who are like relationship people. And I know you guys know what I'm talking about. Honestly, even when I was like braces girl in the 8th grade, I did not look like this. I was not through puberty yet. I still got my like first little boyfriend, you know? It's not always like a looks thing. It's sometimes your personality. It's how you're willing to go about things with men. And we're gonna dive into it. So I'm like kind of blushing. I feel like embarrassed, because that's kind of like, I think it's an embarrassing thing to admit, especially online in our modern world, where we have this attitude of, I don't need a man. And I was totally a girl who was like, no, I do. I love men. Where are they? I want to be in a relationship. I want to be married. I was always kind of like unashamed of that. Like, a lot of people make fun of women who, like I said, want to get their MRS degree, want to be married. But you know what? I was unabashedly, unashamedly somebody who likes being in a relationship. I knew what I wanted. I wanted to be married, fell in love with my husband. I'm living my best life. Like, there is a level of shame I really encourage you guys to strip away from this. Like, you don't need to be embarrassed about wanting to meet guys or like being that girl who likes guys. Like, there's nothing wrong with it if you're not compromising your inner core of who you are or your dignity. You can go about flirting and being available to guys and being open to relationships without losing your dignity. You can do it in an elegant way that does not come across as desperate while still being really effective. Like I said, first boyfriend when I was 13. I count it because he paid for a movie ticket when we all went as a group of people. He was like my first boyfriend. When we broke up, I used my friend to tell his friend that we were no longer seeing each other. So that explains like how intimate that relationship was. Most people, almost half of people, will meet their partner through work, social connections, church, things like that. The other half, it's like online dating or meeting at a bar or restaurant, like strangers interacting. But I want to focus on this video. We can all online date. We can all put up cute pictures. We can all like say who we are and hope that the right guy swipes on us. But when we're meeting in real life, we have a lot more control. You have so much more control over those relationships and you have a lot more opportunity than you might believe. Number one thing, outside of working on yourself, making sure you're cute, whatever, the number one thing is making sure you have a wide social reach. When I was in university, I did not like limit myself with where my husband might be, assuming that I would meet a husband in university. He could be the guy who was waiting outside his classroom in the same section, like university building as me, and we happen to see each other most days. It could be a guy I saw at the gym. It could be a guy living on another floor. It could be a guy I always notice at this one table in the dining hall. Like, anybody is a possibility. And I think that's something that a lot of women like need to get into the mindset of. It's like, there are so many possibilities here, and it's key to open up your mind. I was also not a person who had a very specific like physical look. I just wanted to make sure my husband like wouldn't be a lot smaller than me. But physically, I just wanted him to be healthy, sporty. Outside of that, it was all personality. And the thing that's beneficial about that is because personality can come in all shapes and sizes, all backgrounds, all like cultures. So take heed for when you might be limiting yourself and try to expand your mindset. Unfortunately, when your future husband first walks into the room, he's not going to have a label on him that says, I'm your future husband. You have to figure that out yourself. Sometimes it's super obvious if you are totally like, blah, he's not attractive to me. But sometimes he's just a guy. And as you get to know him, you're like, ooh, and you zero in. That's what happened to me. I zeroed in and I was like, I'm obsessed with you. And then we started a relationship, got married, etc. So it's really important to keep your social network wide and your mindset wide and to really consider lots of different opportunities and people. Now, I'm not saying go around like a piranha and everybody is like there for you to date, but it's not bad to have in the back of your mind like, just consider. Like when you see him, just consider. That cute guy you see at the grocery store, consider. And when I'm talking about social network, I'm not talking about your friends and family setting you up. I'm talking about you like are friends with somebody who's friends with somebody and you all go to this one thing and that's how you meet each other. That's how almost half of people meet their person, is by social networking. So if you are home, or if you are in a country where you don't know anybody, or you are at university and you have no friends, you are reducing yourself. Like maybe you're dating, but it's mostly online dating. You're reducing 50% of the opportunity you could have. Because like I said, 50% of people meet people at work or in person through church, social networking stuff. So to increase your dating opportunities in a really healthy way, growing your social network is key. And the way to do that is often with women. It's okay to make friends with guys, but my actual best advice is to make friends with women, because women have husbands, they have brothers, they have cousins, they have coworkers. Not necessarily, again, to set you up with, but just people that when you make friends with people, you're going to be exposed to more people. That being said, once you're exposed to more people, because you're going to things, you're meeting people, you have a wide friend group, take opportunities where they are presented. If you find yourself even slightly thinking about a guy or you think he's kind of cute, go for it. And I don't mean like, oh, ask him out on a date, but try to suss things out by talking to him, finding a way to just us two at the water cooler at work, just us two in this corner at this party. Oh, can you teach me I heard you like pickleball. Want to play sometime? Like, there's a lot of movement here. Now, this is where I'm going to get to a section of advice that goes against a lot of traditional marriage people online. And that is, and I've said this before and I have a blog post about it, it's okay to make the first move. Making the first move is not the same as making all the moves. The first move is just a signal to a guy of, hey, this like girl, you have a shot with her. That's all it is. Even if it's like, hey, like I said, I heard you play pickleball, like, want to teach me sometime? Or you were telling me about this book that you were reading, like, could I borrow a copy sometime? Like, getting little opportunities, like, you guys probably, like, you can see as I'm giving this advice, you're probably like, oh, she is that boyfriend girl. But you kind of gotta, like, work it. You gotta work it. You gotta be social. And part of being confident is just practicing. I'm not saying I never struck out. I absolutely struck out in college, like starting a conversation with a guy only to find out he has a girlfriend who's studying abroad. And then you're like, okay, bye. Like embarrassing, but at least I tried. And again, it's not the same as like, hey, would you like to go out to dinner? I'll pay. Like that can be kind of like masculine. And if you don't want to do that, you really don't have to. I never did that. But there's like this weird, like amalgamous like area where it's not asking him out on a date, but it's not like letting him make the first move necessarily. And that's where you strike up the conversations. You find opportunities to like get time alone with him or one-on-one at least, doing a little activity together. Like, oh, volunteering at church and he's going to be doing this. I mean, that might be a bad example. Like, don't volunteer just to meet men. But you know what I mean? Maybe a work project. So you do a work project together. Or you are, have this subcontractor at your job and you think he's kind of cute. So you volunteer to take over the opportunity. I'm just saying, like, open yourself up for opportunities. And that's part of, I think, when you're single and you're dating, don't put your blinders on. Don't put your blinders on. Be open. A lot of these men are great. And a lot of them aren't on dating apps. That's also what I've learned, like, from my friends and family, is a lot of these great guys, a lot of the great guys I'm related to, they're not on dating apps. They're just living their life. And so how do we find them? You kind of have to like work it, like the social networks and being open. Like just because you make the first move, I think there's this faux pas taboo thing, like, oh, that sets up the relationship for him, like not pursuing her. Yes, if you're the one like paying for everything and organizing the dates and picking him up in your car and texting him first, yes. But making the first move, asking to borrow a copy of his textbook or his book that he was talking about or whatever, that is very different. Which brings me to another opportunity and way to meet men. And this is going to be DEFCON 5. You really want to meet a man. That is why I'm giving you this advice, and it might be embarrassing, but it works. And that is to go where the men are. I would go to where the men are. Like, get some hobbies where men are. I would join a golf lake. I would maybe join a shooting range. I would absolutely like be going to that friend of a friend's bonfire, that friend of a friend's boat party. I would be going to all the things at church. And of course you can wear yourself thin with this, but there is so much value in showing up to opportunities, because that is where you will find these people. Because high quality men are not sitting at home looking at corn and video games and smoking pot, like being gross. Those people, maybe they're online dating, I don't know, but you don't want that. To meet the guys who have a great career, a great social network, some status, like they're not like broke and like poverty mindset, to meet them, they're busy, they're volunteering, they have their hobbies, they have their career. So you have to do that stuff too. This also leads me to the topic of charm. There's a Bible verse, charm is deceptive, beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. I love that Bible verse. However, we can take it too far where we don't try to be charming at all. And yes, there is deceptive charming where you're trying to lure a guy or a married man, or you're being evil. But then there's just charm, sweet. Like I said, when you're meeting these men, it's really important to present yourself in the best foot possible, but also just show interest in them. So this is where charm comes in, where it's like you're remembering things about them. I got this one guy one time, he was just like smitten with me after one conversation. And I remember thinking it was so weird, but looking back, I know why. And it was because we talked and I remembered a detail about him. And he found that really like nice. Like he just really liked that this girl like remembered something about him. So when you're meeting people, try to remember details, remember the things they like, remember hobbies. And then there's of course, like I said, DEFCON 5, super desperate, like maybe not desperate, but DEFCON 5, you're putting on all the charms. Baking, cooking, showing your feminine stuff. If you guys haven't heard of engagement chicken yet, there's this viral recipe where if you're dating a guy, they say if you make this recipe, this like roasted chicken in the oven, he'll propose. There's so many testimonies from people like, yeah, I made him engagement chicken and he proposed in like a month or the next day. And I know that's really silly, but what is that saying? It's just saying like sometimes guys are just looking for that extra wifey quality. And that goes back to the beginning of the video where I'm discussing working on yourself. Just like you're looking for a guy with husband material, someone who's mature, collected, healthy, has like a stable income. He's going to be looking for someone who has wifey qualities. Often that, especially if you want to be traditional homemaker, you're doing this to yourself, it often includes some sort of like cooking, being hygienic, clean, pretty, being like maternal, those kind of things, if you're attracting like the traditional guy we're talking about. So showing those qualities goes a really long way to set you apart just from like, you know, everybody else, because you're showing like, I'm homemaker wifey, that's your brand. And this is also kind of like, I don't know if it's crass or not romantic, but there's always like a brand you're carrying with yourself as you're going out into the world. And oftentimes we judge people really, really fast. And I think if you want to put yourself in the wifey category, showing that feminine side of you, maybe that maternal side, that like domestic side, that kind of stuff can really show fast to the guys around you what you want out of life, who you are, your like homemaker wifey material. You know, there's a difference there. So I really think it's important to work on those qualities as well, especially like I said at the top of the video, if you're interested in attracting that traditional guy who wants a homemaking wife. Be careful though. Be careful with these type of men. You don't want to attract someone who's very controlling or someone who expects you to just be their maid, who they can intermittently sleep with. Like, be very careful. I know that that is like a criticism that the homemaking community get. Like, oh, these men, like they're just taking advantage of the women. And I'm not going to say that's completely wrong because I do think that can happen. I do think sometimes when you're looking for that traditional guy, that's why I like really stress to you guys, do not be desperate, because sometimes this type of lifestyle can attract men who are bad actors, who do like want like a very self-centered life and they don't care about you that much. They just want somebody who can like serve them, okay? So it's really, really important to be careful. And that's why I stress, like, don't just put your blinders on, really consider these men. So go out there, work on your social network. So many women, whenever I ask in a YouTube video, where did you meet your husband? So many people say church. So many people say like church, friend of a friend, childhood friend. And what do these things all have in common? Social networks, meeting people, putting yourself out there. Like I said, do not over spiritualize dating where it's like, when is God just gonna give me my man? Work on yourself, but also put yourself out there. There is an element, even if you are a shy person, I was a very shy child, even if you are naturally quiet, you can still go to things. You can still make yourself available. You can still show that you're interested in subtle ways. You don't have to be this like really extroverted social butterfly woman who's just gonna go swoop herself up a man, but you can still, at the end of the day, smile. That's like my like number one thing. Like if you like a guy, make sure you're smiling at him, you're listening to him. But also, maybe I'll make a whole other video about this. Like you want to be smile, you want to be like show you're interested, but he's got to like have a little bit of feeling in him, like he's just winning something when he's going out with you. That's advice I've seen on YouTube too. And that's just the idea that he's like really just winning at life when you said yes to going out with him. And the way to get that, again, is to not be desperate. It's like okay to have that desire, but have standards. Don't just like drop everything in your schedule to make something work with a guy. Don't just like keep pursuing him over and over. Like let him chase you. That's why this is a complicated topic, because there's so many different dynamics and conflicting advice that when combined all together, it works and it forms a relationship. But you have to do a little bit of everything. You have to do a little bit of, maybe I will ask him about his favorite book or if he can teach me pickleball. But that's it. I'm not making a second date with him. He can do that. Maybe I'll even pretend to be busy. You know, there's like a little bit of like playfulness you're going to want to have there so that you can signal, hey, I'm not just some girl you can yank around and like make a situationship with. That's the key, because we're not just talking about how do you meet men. You could go out on the street tomorrow and like meet a man, meet a boyfriend. We're talking about husbands here, good husbands who treat you well, who are not abusive, who are going to have a wonderful life with you, be loyal to you, faithful. These kind of guys, they're going to want to feel like they found you. And you can still do that while being available, while being like present. And like I keep saying, like showing that desire, like she's kind of into you, but you have to work for it. There's always that balance there. Okay. So I'll probably make more videos about this topic because relationships are just such an evergreen thing, but I cannot stress to you guys enough how much you need to be out there hitting the pavement. You need to be going to things in person. And no, you don't need to cycle through online date after online date after online date. I feel like that can be really exhausting. But just going out there, living your life, making your life very fulfilling, where you're focused on friends and family and your hobbies, and you're showing up to things, that will open you up to just like a world of men. And that's what I've learned from my comments. Most of you meet your men in person. Most of you do. Back when I was in university, I was an intern for a wedding video company, and one of the jobs I had to do was do a little blog post write-up about the couples we did wedding videos for, like how they met. And it was really interesting because most of the couples kind of had like weird stories, and I think I've told this story before, but like their chairs bumped into each other at a restaurant. They were both eating with their families and they turned and it was like, oh, sorry. And then he grabbed her number. One girl, she was driving down the highway and this guy like kept passing her. They kept passing each other. And then he put his phone number like on a piece of paper and like slammed it against the window and she texted him. I know, crazy story. Other people, childhood friends or people who like met in college in the same class or they worked in the same department, like accounting department. Something that all of these stories have in common is that there was a little bit of give and a little bit of take. And that is the woman being open to opportunities. I think if we go into life just being like, every guy around me is a creep and I'm too scared to look desperate, so I'm not going to flirt, or I'm not going to let my friends and family set me up because that's embarrassing, you're just shutting down opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And it's important to be a little bit of shameless with this, where you're not ashamed of like, oh, I'd love to be in a relationship. But that does not mean I'm going to marry just anybody. It doesn't mean I'm going to start a relationship with just anybody. But it does mean that you're open and you're not embarrassed. And I think that mindset fuels the rest of this. Because like I said, some people are always in a relationship, whether they live like in the middle of nowhere or whether they are like work with only women. Some women are just always in a relationship. And the difference is not the type of men that's around or anything like that. The difference is often their mindset and how they approach dating, how they view themselves. Again, I cannot say this enough. Do not be desperate. Do not be settling, because we don't want marriage problems, like severe, horrible, abusive marriage problems down the road. But it's okay to be open. It's okay to pursue those opportunities and not worry so much what other people think. Don't worry so much about what your friends and family think. Even if that means being single for longer than your friends and family want you to, or even you wanted to. Working on yourself and becoming mentally healthy is just the best thing you could be doing with your time. So my voice is starting to leave, and I've given a lot of that advice that I feel like I've given so much advice, and a lot of it might not seem applicable to how to meet traditional men, but I promise you all of this is helpful, and it is literally the playbook that I follow. Like working on yourself, being open to opportunities. Don't be embarrassed of wanting to be in a relationship. Follow things through as well. Like follow through. Give dates 1 or 2 tries. Like sometimes, you know when you know, but sometimes letting someone warm up to you too. I think, okay, last piece of advice. I really do think some people in our modern world, and this would have been me, we take a little bit to feel very attracted to somebody. Like we kind of need to know their story. We need to like learn their intelligence and their humor and their quirky qualities. And then we're like all of a sudden so obsessed with them. But if you're only having one date with this like online dating guy, or like only saw somebody one time, you don't have an opportunity to really know them. So I really encourage you to try to really get to know people. Try to really get to know these men more so than just on paper. Okay, he's 6'1", he has this job, he wants kids, cool. Or, oh, he's too short for me, or blah, 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 or he does that. Really try to get to know people, because sometimes what we fall in love with is not whether or not they want kids too, or if they're over 6 foot, or how much money they make. What we really fall in love with is who they are. And if you never give yourself an opportunity to really know who somebody really is, you're not going to fall in love. You need to get to know people. Yes, there should be deal breakers. Like, he is like a foot shorter than me, or he has no job, or whatever. Yes, there's obvious things. But sometimes people can kind of fit our mold. Maybe they're not like a perfect match for what we thought, but we give it a chance, and then we get to know them, and then we fall in love. Just remember that you really do have to put yourself out there. You have to get to know these people, because people are so much more than just what's on paper. Like, for better or for worse, sometimes they look amazing on paper and then they're a total nightmare, okay? So I could keep talking. Maybe I need to start a podcast where I can just like blab about this stuff forever. But I do appreciate you guys listening. Leave your advice below. I missed so much, and I'm probably going to make a part 2 to this topic because I missed so much, but I really want to hear your feedback, your thoughts, how you met your man. Give advice to the single women, because like, I think sometimes you can feel embarrassed, like, oh, I'm giving this advice and I'm just a married woman, but that advice is really helpful. You guys are the ones who know how to do this. You accomplished it. You found a husband. Share the tea. Share the recipe. So thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in more of this kind of content, I have a bunch of relationship videos on a relationship playlist. I do highly recommend my video on compatibility. It's short. My earlier videos on YouTube are much shorter. Check out the comment section as well. There's also other creators on YouTube who talk about this stuff. Take my advice with a grain of salt. None of it may apply to you. I'm just glad you hung out with me. Hopefully it was entertaining. Hopefully you learned a little bit about me at the very least. My homework for you this week is to work out, do your hair and makeup, and smile at a guy you think is cute. Maybe something will come of it. But in general, I hope you have a wonderfully blessed and romantic week, my beautiful sisters.